Well, the Media Foundation for West Africa, together with its partners, is appealing to government to make the internet accessible and affordable to all Ghanaians, particularly persons in the rural areas, to enable them to have access to information easily. We'll just watch this clip. We'll come back. I'll introduce to you my guests after this.
At a lecture on internet freedom, Dr. H.A. Sikanku of the School of Communication Studies at the University of Ghana identified access, affordability and capacity as some of the major challenges with internet penetration in the country and asked government to address it.
Internet also leads to a lot of decentralization of power into the hands of people. You know, people are their own experts and they know more about their communities than you sitting at the center think you know about them. And so if we think that decentralization is a very popular development, is an appropriate mechanism in which to go in terms of our own development practices. You know, I can't imagine of a better medium to do this than to use the internet.
He added that adequate training on internet usage was necessary to make the public demand accountability from public officials. Chief Executive of the Telecoms Chamber, Kweku Sechi Ado, identified the internet as a major development tool and called on government to use it effectively to propagate its policies.
We believe that one of the things that we've got to have in Ghana is for a gradual migration of ministries, departments and agencies and other public institutions to more and more use the internet for the delivery of public services. It will make them more accountable, it will make them more efficient, it will give us better services and make everybody more productive.
Director of Research at the Ministry of Communications, Patricia Simpson, outlined some government intervention to improve internet penetration in the country.
Currently, government is deploying 780 fiber optic backbone infrastructure, stretching from Ho in the Volta region to Boku in the Upper East region, with a link to Tamale through Yendi. This Eastern Corridor fiber optic infrastructure project is aimed at increasing broadband infrastructure and service delivery in selected municipal and district assemblies, including 120 communities along the routes.
Officials also tasked government to have functional websites so that information about government policies at the various ministries and state agencies and departments can be made accessible to all.
And I have with me here the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, Mr. Suleiman Brahima. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You took over from Professor Kakari. How is it going?
Well, I think it's going well. I think we had, good mentoring from the good old professor. And so I'm sure that, the team at the Media Foundation now is ready and willing to go. You know,
my fear was that he would overshadow you because, where people are so used to him. I mean, do you get that feeling?
Well, I think that the prof had his own strategy, even though I didn't know from the beginning. When the whole of 2013, he would not take interviews and would direct everything. So you didn't know you were going to be the executive director? And so I think that at some point, the Media Foundation, which used to be like, okay, you mentioned Media Foundation is Kwame Karikari, it eventually, faded off, and Media Foundation now became a team, an organization, and it's either Suleimana, Abigail, Dora, or Vivian, or someone else talking. Okay, so you're enjoying your executive directorship position? Well, I think it's challenging, but the good thing is, I think the folks at the Media Foundation are incredibly committed to the work, and they have a passion for what we do, and that is making the work, quite enjoyable. Okay. I wouldn't say easy, but it's enjoyable. It's challenging, but we enjoy what we do. Okay. I'm excited that you're a young person, and we have you. We can easily relate to you. And so I'm grateful that you're here this morning. Thank you. Now you're asking for internet freedom. Don't we have enough of it? No, we don't. You see, internet freedom, or even freedoms, comes in different dimensions. and particularly when we talk about the internet, if you are looking at the freedom from the point of view of either harassment, surveillance, privacy breaches, or legislation that restricts people's access and use of the internet, then you may be right saying that, well, we already have those freedoms. But the freedom of the internet has other dimensions, like, well, there may not be laws preventing you from using the internet, but do you have access to the internet? That is one.
Most of us are able to access it on our phones, for instance, well, even though it is expensive.
Yeah, but well, that's because you are speaking from Accra. I'm not sure if you go to Bunkrugu Yoyo or Pusiga or Garutimpani or Tepa or Edubiase, the experience will be the same. Because we have mainly private operators who would set up or make the internet accessible in communities or areas where they think they can get profit. And that is the key thing. We're talking about the fact that a lot more people are unable to access the internet. Those of us who are able to access, I think we are paying relatively a huge amount to have access to the internet. And then the other bit is, even when you can have access and you can afford, do you have the capacity to be able to use the internet in a beneficial way, to be able to use the internet in a way that allows you to participate fully in governance discourse and in public debates? I think most of us are still, because I'm able to send email, receive email, Facebook and do WhatsApp, and I think I'm fine. But, do you have a better understanding of how you protect your privacy online? Do you have a better understanding of how, not to allow people to easily hack into your mails and so on and so forth? How are we building the capacity of students in schools so that they graduate with experiences using the internet and knowing a lot about the internet and how to use it? I think all these things are issues of freedoms. So it's not just restrictive laws or harassment by police or preventing people from Skyping or using, voice over internet facilities, but access, affordability, capacity to use are all issues.
So why is this call not at the doorsteps of the telecoms industry, but you're calling on government?
Well, first of all, I think government is, let's say, the regulator, the policy initiator and implementer as far as the internet ecosystem in the country is concerned. And so obviously, if we are talking about taxes, we are talking about legislation, we are talking about where internet access should be made available, I think the government has a big role to play. But you also notice that this forum also brought the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Telecoms Chamber. And that chamber is, as the CEO put it, the role is to have that interface or play that interfacing role between the telecom companies, private sector, government, policymakers, and so on and so forth. And so he was there to share the frustrations or the issues that the telecoms companies are going through, and ways in which, what are the things that can be done to ensure that, well, internet penetration would increase, it may be affordable. There were issues of cable cuts and thefts, the infrastructure that need to be in place to allow for internet penetration and access.
So I take it that we had government reps also there?
Yes, in fact, the Minister for Communication was supposed to be there yesterday, but we had a notice from his office late Monday that he had to attend to another assignment, and so he was ably represented and his speech was delivered.
So at least government is aware of the issues brought forth. But what I also wanted to ask is, did we also take the opportunity to tell the telcos our challenges, particularly with costs?
Well, I think the issue of cost was highly articulated at the forum by NGO representatives, by people in the technology sector, and of course even by other players who one would say, like the Internet Society, for example.
So why is it so expensive?
Well,
because we have to. I want to believe that if we're able to tackle the issue with cost, then we can talk about everybody getting access to the internet. But the way it is, even if we're to make it free for everyone to be able to access it everywhere, then the cost will be the hindrance?
Well, I think that first of all, I'm unable to really explain why, but I can share what I have heard, specifically from the head of the telecoms chamber. And I think that there are legitimate issues. For example, there's the issue of taxation, how much government is taxing the telcos. The other issue is about the cost for operation, and especially at this time when electricity is not stable. And one of the issues he raised was almost every base station has to be provided, has to have a generating, electricity generating machine, because once a while the lights will go off. Apart from that, there are cable tests, batteries and other facilities at base stations often get stolen. And I think that there are also issues about infrastructural planning within the country. How much they are charged by district assemblies to have their towers erected, how much they are charged by assemblies to have maybe construction done through a particular place to lay a cable. I think these are some of the issues that they raise as far as cost is concerned. But coming from a private body and as a user, I think perhaps there's still a lot more that telcos can do in terms of cost.
Yeah, sure. So having said all these, you think that government will heed to this call that you're making?
Well, I think that from the ministry's point of view, and yesterday, let me add, that we also had the Director General of the National Information Technology Agency, which is the body that is implementing government policies and programs on ICT and internet in the country. And I get a sense that a lot is being done. I get a sense that government is prioritizing ICT and internet development in the country. We were told, for example, that there is a cable that is being laid from Boku through Tamale, Yendi to Ho, as the minister's representative was saying. I am hopeful, or I'm hoping, that these are not just political statements, but actually things that are going to be realized. And as they indicated, we are likely to have it completed by the end of 2014.
Yeah, but most importantly, what would it mean to us?
Well, what it will mean, I think, is that the telcos would have an easier way of tapping into these cables and providing internet access to communities where, right now there isn't. As of now, I am sure if a telco wants to extend, let's say, broadband to Boku, for example, what it will require is that a cable has to be laid. And the cost of doing that, I think, is quite huge. But if government has already done this, then tapping into that and making internet accessible to communities, outside of Accra and the regional capitals becomes quite easier.
Okay, so making internet accessible is one thing, but what would we want them to use it for? Because already, I mean, even for those of us who do, a lot of us do social media. A lot of people with Facebook and Twitter and then WhatsApp. What else can we use it for?
Well, I think elsewhere where people, that's why I talked about the capacity of citizens to make good use of the internet. Elsewhere, you have people developing all manner of apps that are contributing to various sectors of the economy, either the health, agriculture, child health, or what you can think of. People are developing apps to ensure that there is ICT-enabled development interventions happening in all these sectors. Apart from that, even the issue of citizen journalists and blogging. In Tamale, for example, we could have young guys coming together to develop a site that says, well, we want to use it to track the performance of our minister, the performance of our DCEs. People can post questions and demand answers, community development issues, and so on and so forth. Even our parliament, elsewhere, a lot are being done to track what happens in parliament. I've heard people complain a lot about the importance of getting to know which MP said what, which MP voted for what issue, what has been the position of various MPs, what did they promise when they were, campaigning, and what are they doing. I am sure that if we had the capacity and the know-how, sites could be developed, apps could be developed that will help us do this tracking, so that when we talk about issues-based campaigning during elections, we have basis to do so, rather than, not having any baseline to say that, you know, you said it the last time, this is what you did or you couldn't do. And so if you are making a similar promise, how do we trust that? Even our own government, the executive, in terms of its policy interventions, the manifesto, the promises and all of that, perhaps we could have a website that helps us to track, to access government information and so on and so forth. So first of all, people must have access to it. People should be able to afford. Our schools must prioritize ICT education, and then citizens would then have their capacity be built to be able to make good use of it. And that's why they talk about ICT literacy being important.
So after this meeting, what next?
Well, it's a project that the Media Foundation started last year. One of the things that we've had to do under the project is to bring together, I think up till now, about 32 civil society organizations in Ghana into what we call the Internet Freedom Coalition, CSO Internet Freedom Coalition in Ghana. We had a meeting with the coalition to plan on activities for 2014, and within the next 2 weeks, I think what is going to happen is to organize a capacity building for members of the CSO coalition so that they are able to effectively articulate and support the advocacy around internet freedom in the country. So a lot is happening. Yeah,
this is a good thing. Yeah. I mean, you're saying a lot of things that we don't particularly sit down to think about, but this would really help. This will really help. But let's move away from internet freedom. Are you still monitoring the use of intemperate language on our airwaves?
Well, we've shifted a bit, but we are still within the framework of promoting professional standards. That was being done because of the elections and the fact that there was a lot that was going on in terms of indecent expression. And we wanted to also contribute to the whole agenda of having our politicians and the media focusing on issues rather than propaganda and other things. But what we are going to do now, in fact, it's even started, is to monitor professional ethics in our media. And we are doing so on 40 media outlets, 25 radio stations, including your partner Joy, 10 newspapers in the country, and 5 online news websites, again including My Joy Online. The idea is to monitor infractions, ethical infractions that happen on these networks, highlight them, get experts to deliberate on these infractions that come up on quarterly basis, and to prepare solutions. How could it have been done to avoid this kind of, violation? And
did you mention any of the local stations?
Oh yes, I think out of the 25 radio stations, there are about just 4 or 5 that are English-speaking stations. The rest are, majority are Twi-speaking stations because of the Accra, Kumasi, and then we have some from the north that would be using predominantly Dagari in Upper West, Dagbani in northern region, and the Gruni or Bulsa and other languages.
Are you using the same measure though? I mean, are you measuring all of them the same way? Because the local language stations do their things differently.
Well, you're right, but I think that ethics in journalism is universal. Universal in terms of geography, universal in terms of language. So if you have to be fair, you have to be fair whether you are using English or Hausa or Twi. If you have to be balanced, you have to do so. If you have to protect people's privacy, whether you are using English or Dagbani or Hausa, it's still the same. And so in terms of the indicators that we are using, they are the same indicators, except that there are slight differences when it comes to radio and newspapers and even online. For example, online, we'll be looking at the issue of readers' comments. How are the websites or the managers of those news websites handling readers' comments in a way that readers can't just put anything there and then it goes. And so that's something unique to online. When you take radio, there may be certain things that we will be tracking which cannot be applied to newspapers. For example, if you are looking at whether a headline matches with the content. You know, you can't do that with radio, but then we will do that with newspapers and online.
Okay.
So there are a little bit differences here and there. But
you know, and this is an issue that's been coming. It's coming and keeps coming and going back and forth. And I did have a conversation with the news editor of Adom FM not too long ago. You know, a lot of people criticize the cheese stations for the way they present their news in particular. And we have a lot of schools, journalism institutions in Ghana in English, but we do not for the local languages. Is it supposed to be so?
Well, as I said, I think that the principles of journalism is universal, and therefore it's about how you apply it. If you are doing an investigative story or you are doing a documentary, the principles that we were taught in our journalism schools will be the same. And if you are using whatever language, you are supposed to apply the same principles. I think what is happening in the local language newsrooms, and I have been told by presenters and producers that in most instances they don't even have scripts. You know, and so it's just about Dr. Bawumia presenting this lecture yesterday, and so they familiarize themselves with what happened, and so they rattle it.
I know some of them also have the English scripts with them. It's not translated, so they are looking at the scripts and they are live, so and they are interpreting it as, you know, as they go. You know. No,
I think even if it was good, I mean, what we are experiencing was a direct translation of the English scripts. Maybe it would have been better, but you know, you often have either they are giving some comedy, or they are exaggerating certain things, or they are adding on to things.
But have we also, are we, you know, recognizing the fact that they are also selling? Well, so and if this is what the people want, then why not give it to them? Because a lot of people also enjoy news when it is presented that way, and that's why they listen.
It's not the case really. If you take the local language stations, we have to understand that we are in a country where literacy levels are still, you know, an issue. You have a lot of people who better understand their local language than the English language, but that is what they have, you know, and so it's not more of what they like, but that is what they have, and they've almost gotten used to it. The BBCs, the Joys, and so on, they do, you know, some of the most professional things, and they happen to also have, you know, sometimes the biggest audience amongst those who understand English language. And if you take the BBC local language services, they do a perfect thing, whether it's a Hausa service or it is a Burmese service or the Japanese service. The principles of journalism are not compromised.
All right, Suleiman Abrahima, we will definitely continue this conversation some other time. But when you take the Joynews channel as well, we also do an excellent job. We stay with the ethics of the profession. But that will be it for the AM show this Wednesday. Tomorrow is Thursday. We're counting down to Friday. We love Fridays. But thank you so much for being a part of our show from 6